Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sinyavadi Pachati. So today I want to start with a story. There's several stories, and then make some conclusions from these stories that I think are very important for us. So, during Prabhupada's time, there were young men who were very dedicated to Prabhupada. And either he asked them to take sannyas, or they wanted to take sannyas. Some that wanted he didn't give, and some he did. In total, he gave sannyas to 45 devotees. And maybe the oldest, I actually don't know how old he was, but I don't think anyone, I think the oldest might have been 30, and the average was about 22. So, of those 45, I think 17 made it, and 45 minus 17 is how much? I'm tired, I can't add. But 45 minus 17 is 20, 28. 28 didn't. And one of the sannyasis that didn't make it, sometimes sannyasis that didn't make it just didn't leave in a nice way. They ran off and they'd taken money, ran off with another woman in the temple, very, very Bollywood style, dramatic, not just, I can't do this anymore. And naturally, when they came to their senses months or years later, they wanted to apologize, they wanted to serve. But many of them thought that what they had done was so bad that Prabhupada wouldn't even want to see them, wouldn't want to talk to them. So there's a couple stories that I know of in which these sannyasis came back to Prabhupada. And they were very embarrassed, and they were feeling that they would be condemned. And Prabhupada treated them like nothing had happened. And so he said, okay, if you want to be grihastha, that's okay. You can serve that way. And he would say, so why don't you take up your service, the service you had before you left sannyas? It was kind of amazing when you think about it. Not the way sometimes we would feel that we should deal with somebody like that, right? Like, why are you giving them a position? They were sannyas, they did this and that. So there's a couple of stories where the exact same thing happened, where they came back and Prabhupada, will you accept me? And Prabhupada said, of course. I could never forget the service you've done. I'm thankful, and so forth. So, there's another story. One of our godbrothers, before he came to ISKCON, he was a guru, and he was teaching from Prabhupada's books, and he had his own disciples. I don't know if they were officially initiated. I never knew that much about them, but basically they were his people. And then when he surrendered to Prabhupada, they all came with him. It's just, I don't know how many were, 50, 100, 200, they all came. And he was a very independent thinker, and he didn't like everything ISKCON was doing in terms of preaching and branding and public relations, and he had different ideas. And he, I think, had come, I think it must have been 1972, that his people had come to ISKCON. In about 1976, he had enough differences that he started working on his own, which means independent of ISKCON authority, but he was is instructing his devotees to chant 16 rounds and follow the principles and like that. But the way they were preaching was different. Their style and how they wanted to appear to the public and so forth. So there's a morning walk conversation, and devotees are expressing how they're not happy with him, criticizing him, being separate, and some of the things he's thinking. And Prabhupada stopped them. And so here's the point I wanted to make. In all three stories, we have a problem. And the problem is, we don't necessarily see those people the way their spiritual master sees them. So, here's this sannyasi. He actually left, took money, ran off with a brahmacharini, and who knows what they were doing. And maybe like 6 months, a year later, he comes back. He actually sent his danda to Prabhupada when he left, and then he comes back. And Prabhupada says, I can never forget the service you've done. Like a much different reaction than maybe we would have imagined, or maybe a much different reaction than we think they deserved. How can you let them come back? Look what they did, etc. And so, with this devotee who had left and was independent, and then he was being criticized by the people in ISKCON, Prabhupada stopped him. He said, he is my disciple. They were trying to get Prabhupada to correct him or chastise him. He's my disciple. I will deal with him the way I like, and I have affection for him, even though he's doing what he's doing. So, the point is, just as we said yesterday, or the day before, there's a verse in the Bhagavatam where Krishna says, the devotees are in my heart, and I am in their heart. So, what Krishna is trying to say is that a devotee is dear to me. And so, if you offend someone who's dear to me, I'm offended by that. Even though maybe that person is doing something not so good. But that person is dear to Krishna. So even though that person may be in the wrong, but because that person's dear to Krishna, if you offend that person, it hurts Krishna. Right? That's a simple understanding. It's the same understanding of why the holy name is offended. You think, why is it an offense to the holy name if I'm offending a Vaishnava? Because the holy name is Krishna, and Krishna is not happy when we offend his devotees, because the devotees are in his heart. So, this may not be such a big issue for you, but it may become, and it probably will become as you progress in devotional service, that you're going to find somebody doing something which you disagree with, and you become critical. And specifically in the case of Prabhupada disciples, there are many that have left. They have different strategies for preaching, and which may seem maybe at odds in some ways with what Prabhupada taught. But these people did so much service for Prabhupada and were so dear to Prabhupada that we run the risk of offending Prabhupada by offending them. Does that make sense? So a lot of times we don't understand the whole context. We just, he did this, or he said this, or I heard 20 years ago he did this, and that's all bad. But do you know all the things he did that made him dear to Prabhupada? So that's also there. Many of these people that are being criticized today were like very close to Prabhupada. They did so much service. And so I'm not saying we should rationalize or excuse things if people do something wrong. But sometimes the something wrong they're doing is just in our mind. It may not even be wrong. Or it may not be that wrong. Or it may not be wrong enough that Prabhupada would even worry about it. And then we can become critical. And so the same thing if you take it today. So somebody's criticizing Mohini. she's this and that. But Mohini is very dear to her spiritual master, so her spiritual master is hurt that she's being criticized by somebody else. So you think you're just criticizing her, now you're hurting another Vaishnava. So I think that's important to understand. And I always try to think this way. Even if I hear that a god brother has done something which I don't agree with, maybe not something bad per se, but I feel that's not, maybe was the best thing, or mistreated a devotee, was harsh or whatever. I don't think that's right, but still, I always try to think how dear this devotee is to Prabhupada, all the service he did, and so forth. And so, I think it's good to have that same kind of generous mood that Prabhupada had. That we made many mistakes, but we did many things, and somehow or other, so many devotees became very endeared to Srila Prabhupada. So we need to be careful, because I think sometimes we innocently may criticize somebody, but we don't realize by criticizing them we may be hurting the heart of Prabhupada, we may be hurting the heart of their spiritual master, or we may be hurting the heart of other devotees that are their friends, their well-wishers. Does that make sense? And then, I think we discussed this on the first day. There's an unspoken truth, which is not true, but it seems to be true. That if someone does something wrong, and I point it out, then there's nothing wrong with me. Because I'm just speaking the truth, and the truth should be spoken. And that's not true. Only in specific cases, when it's necessary and beneficial, it should be spoken. But where it's not necessary or beneficial, then it's not meant to be spoken, even though it could be right. And the reason is because when we see the faults of another, it degrades us. The fault finder gets degraded. So if you have a fault, and I say, oh, you have a fault, you do this and that, it seems innocent. But the fact is I'm degrading myself. Hold on a second. I'm degrading myself. So in that sense, your fault becomes problematic for me because of me. Not because you're at fault, but because I become focused on it, which was my weakness or my choice to do that. And then as a result, I become degraded by it, even though it's true. So I could say, but you're telling me don't find fault, but it's true. But what's the point? Why do you need to do that? It's like I was reading this conversation or letter when Prabhupada said, so many of you, to us as disciples, are focused on the problems. And that creates, it just pulls you down, it's negative. You should be focused on solutions. So she has a fault, I'm focused on it, her fault, then I become degraded. Whereas we say, I punish myself for her mistake. She does something wrong, I focus on it, and I punish myself because of what she did. But at the same time, if I'm a little humble and a little generous and have a different attitude, then even though she does something which is faulty, I can see so many good things. And I can make a choice to decide to see that way. And then when I do that, I benefit. Because every time you focus on the good quality of another devotee, you'll become inspired by that quality. And every time you focus on the negative, you'll be discouraged by it. That's the nature of the way the mind works. If you focus on negative things, you get discouraged. And if you don't believe me, think of something negative and don't stop thinking about it till I see you tomorrow. And I can guarantee you, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be a little bit discouraged, a little bit depressed, a little bit negative. It has to happen like that. So even though she does something wrong, I don't have to focus on that. And if I do, it's going to have a negative effect on me. But if I focus on something good about her, it's going to have a positive effect on me. So we're punishing ourselves or rewarding ourselves by how we deal with other people. And so, yes, I have a right, you could say, to point out this fault because she did something wrong. Okay, let's say you even have a right to do it. Let's say you have the right to correct because you're an authority, but even still, you have to ask yourself the question, is that something I want to do? Or I need to do? Will it benefit her? Will it benefit me? Will it benefit anyone? Now, there's another thing. It's called collateral damage. Collateral damage means my fault finding is damaging other people. Because now I'm finding fault with her, but usually I'm not telling her, I'm telling you. So now you have to listen to it. And so now, not only am I going down, you're going down with me. Even if you don't want to go down, you will go down because you're listening. And if you don't leave, as soon as I start talking, you will go down. And sometimes you can't leave fast enough, so you've heard it and you get contaminated. Even if you don't believe it, you get contaminated. You say, no, I don't believe that about her, but you just heard me criticizing her. That has gone in your ear and it's toxic. So it's important to understand these things. So I'm criticizing her, it's bringing me down, and it's bringing everyone down that hears it. And it's creating a very unhealthy environment. And, okay, let's say this is actually true, I'm doing this. And then you think, well, Mahatma Prabhu is an older devotee, so he's our role model. And so that's what he's doing. And this could be subconscious, not even conscious. You just see me doing it. And a few years from now, you get in a position of authority and you start doing it. And you don't even know why. It's because I did it. And subconsciously, it was just like when you become a leader, that's what you do. So it's having collateral damage because in her mind, I'm setting an example because she thinks I'm Krishna conscious. So whatever I do must be the right thing. And now because I'm doing this, she doesn't. So that's how you create a culture. I've seen this. I've been involved with this, copying the misbehavior of others. Now, what I would suggest is that when you see misbehavior, you make a note, that's misbehavior and I don't want to act that way. If you understand this is wrong, just make a note. Wrong, don't copy that. Copy the opposite. And you know, so let's say I do something wrong, but you don't have to dwell on that. You don't have to become offensive to me. You could just say, I don't really think this was the best way to handle the situation, so I just want to make a note that I don't want to do it that way. And you can learn so much just by observing the mistakes of others. Because sometimes when you see an interaction, it makes you feel bad, doesn't it? You just feel like, no, that wasn't right, but that devotee should not have treated them that way. And you feel bad, and then you make a note. I don't want to do that to other devotees. I don't think that's proper. So, and just to take it to this level of culture, whatever you do, whatever I do, if we live in the same community, or specifically in smaller communities like our temples, whatever I do, whatever you do, it's creating a culture. It's creating a standard, and it not necessarily is even written down that this is the standard. It just becomes a standard, and nobody even realizes it's a standard. And the good thing about it is, if it's a good standard, everyone who comes in adopts it. They're not even conscious. They just start acting like everyone else. But if it's a bad standard, everyone who comes in new, they adopt it also, unconsciously. So if condemning and criticizing becomes the culture, then the new people, after a while, that's what they'll do. Have you seen that? Anyone seen that? Or vice versa. If the culture is appreciation, gratitude, and so forth, then the new people will do that because that's what everybody's doing. So that's why these things are a little dangerous. We think, well, it's not that big a deal, but if enough people do it, it becomes a culture. And then the new people come in, and they may have no inclination to do that, but by being in that culture, they'll start doing it. It's just the way culture works. It's just we're reflecting. I'll give you an example. My sister, I don't know, when my daughter was born, so this was 18 and a half years ago, she came and visited me. And at that time, she had a boyfriend. And my sister was like cursing all the time. And I was like, what's up with the cursing? She said, oh, I'm cursing? She wasn't aware of it because she doesn't talk that way. I said, what's up with that? She says, oh my God, it's my boyfriend. He's always cursing. She didn't even realize. Isn't that interesting? By association, she was doing it and she didn't realize it. So that's the way culture works. You start reflecting the activities of other people. And everybody's doing it and nobody knows it. It's so interesting. Isn't it? Social psychology, mass consciousness, mass thinking. We're culturized and we don't realize it. So there's another problem. There's another problem which leads to offense, and that's the problem of becoming a leader. And I don't want to discourage anyone who has capacity to be a leader or to take position of authority. Maybe not necessarily a leader, but you can take position of authority over some devotees that you're managing. There has been, and I hopefully it's being rooted out in most places, but due to human nature, there's a tendency to think that when I become a leader, I have certain rights. And these are rights to abuse people. Do that, oh, I'm sick, I don't feel like it. No, I'm your authority, you have to. And so if you become a leader, that tendency will be there. Because you think you have a right, or you think you have a job to fulfill, and the job is very important. And the people I work with, they must do the job. So we know it's hard to be humble, but it's even harder when you're a leader. Because people are, in a sense, duty-bound to do what you ask. And that can lead to abuse of one's position. And then so sometimes we find a nice devotee is given a position and he's not so nice anymore. You've seen that happen to you? Yeah. It's kind of this idea of entitlement that I have the right to not be nice because I'm the authority. So I have to be careful about that. And one of the presidents of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, who was president in around 1860, he said that difficulty doesn't test a man as much as giving him honor. Because he said, when there's difficulty, you're forced to tolerate it. You don't really have a choice because you have to get your job done. And so in order to just survive and do what you have to do, you have to be tolerant. So tolerance is not as great a test as giving a man honor and then seeing how he acts in that position. Can he remain humble? Can he remain concerned about others? Can he not take advantage of his position and be kind and considerate and humble when he's given this exalt? Give him. Now I think he said, if you want to test a man, give him power. And then see how he uses the power, because he can misuse it. So that is also a situation in which we can make offenses, because we think we have a right to make offenses. Yes? Isn't that interesting? I'm not offending you because I have a right to, because I'm your authority. Now, I was thinking the other day, it's just a very serious thought, and I think it's important we all meditate on this, and this could be a whole seminar in and of itself. But many people come to ISKCON and many people leave. And that was happening in the beginning, in the middle, it's happening now. And I think for all of us, it's important to understand why. And one of the things that I learned about the corporate world is that the main reason people leave a company is because they don't like their boss. And the main reason they stay is because they like their boss. So if we translate that into ISKCON and say, like, why did people leave? Well, you could say they were in Maya. There may be other reasons, but if they felt mistreated, that certainly would be one of the main reasons. And if they felt well taken care of, it's less likely they would leave, because why would you? Where are you going to go? Right? So that's something we all have to consider. Some of you will become leaders someday. And you're thinking, no, not me. Yeah, well, something. Here's the story. I think Sri Bhuvanath Prabhu was in Buri Place. And the devotees who founded Buri Place, they went to India. And then when that happened, Mukunda Maharaj, he was the other founder, he went back to America. And Sri Bhuvanath said, who's going to become the temple president? Well, he was taking Maharaj to the airport, and all these senior devotees left. He said, who's going to be the president? And Mukunda Maharaj said, you. And he was 19, or maybe he was 18. So sometimes that happens. You're just in a situation and someone has to do something, and there you are, and you look around, there's nobody else, and all of a sudden you're a leader. You have some position. So don't think you won't be a leader. It might be a small leader, like a Sankirtan leader of 2 other devotees. But we've seen when someone is elevated to that position, then they start abusing those 2 other devotees. Possibly because they were abused in some way by their leader. You can translate? How's your voice? It's okay? You want some medicine? I have some medicine. I think I put it in here. Ah, I put it in here. It's from China. all the medicines from China. Made from pomegranate and all kinds of things for the throat. I have tons of that, so you can keep it. You can share. Good for kirtan. Or you taste it, and if you don't scream, keep the bottle. And give it to your other singers.
Scream if it's very sweet, actually. I'm okay with bitter.
It's both. It's take one. I want to look at your face while you take it.
Really? I can just take it like this?
Yeah, just suck it. Yeah, suck it. Okay, everybody look at her face.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, just wait a while. It gets worse. Yes.
I think that we, talk a lot about, tolerating the circumstances in which you are in our
Yes.
preaching in ISKCON, and it feels like we also need to. Not also, I think maybe primarily we need to teach devotees to be able to remove oneself from unfavorable situations
Abusive. Yeah.
without, so in this way they don't need to leave ISKCON, they just can leave situation.
So this is, it's kind of a sensitive topic, but it's important. Obviously, we're not perfect. I mean, you're not perfect, I am perfect. We're working on it. We sometimes may say or do something which is unkind or even abusive or unnecessary. And we're taught to be humble and we're taught to be submissive to authority. But then sometimes you're in a position where an authority is misusing their power and you may be put in an uncomfortable position, or maybe you feel like your needs aren't being met or you're being exploited, you're not being heard and so forth. And generally, according to our philosophy, we should be what? Surrendered and tolerant. Tolerant and surrendered. But, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be, but in some cases, you can surrender and tolerate yourself right out of Krishna consciousness. It's just a fact. You could surrender yourself right out of ISKCON. You could tolerate yourself right out of ISKCON because you're trying to surrender beyond your ability. You're trying to tolerate beyond your ability. And so sometimes we have to understand what our capabilities are, what our boundaries are. Because I've seen many devotees burn themselves out in the name of surrender. And they got so burned out that they left Krishna consciousness. I don't know the exact process of how it happened, but almost like, I just don't want to do this anymore, it's too difficult. And so one thing we understand, one of the problems we face is like we have one standard of surrender for everybody. Like we're all these different levels, but there's one standard, just surrender everything, right? And so obviously not everybody can do that, at least not immediately. So good managers, they understand the capabilities of people and they don't give them instructions that are going to destroy them. Although bad managers will. They won't, they'll think, this is right, this is what you should do. And by giving that instruction and the person, they're not ready to do that, it can break them. And so the manager's trying to help them, but they end up being broken. So sometimes, this is not spoken about, but I think it's important to speak about it. Because sometimes you have to protect yourself. Sometimes, this is going to sound so weird, and I know someone who's going to hear this on the internet is going to think this is crazy and make a comment. But sometimes you have to protect yourself from surrender. Because the surrender that's being pushed on you may be more than you're capable of doing, and it's going to have a negative reaction. It's like, okay, here's 200 kgs, you need to lift it. I can't lift more than 20. No, 200. Well, give me a few weeks, so I'll start. No, you have to lift 200, and you lift it, and you destroy yourself. You break your back or something. So generally a good manager will say, okay, then just do 25 kgs, you do what you can. But you may be sometimes in situations where I don't think it would be not humble to speak up for yourself, but we'll feel that way. It's not my position, I shouldn't. Right? But sometimes we have to, in a humble way. We have to speak up in a humble way. I don't really think I can do this. I don't think this will be healthy. Can we do it differently or do something else? Sometimes that may be necessary because you need to preserve yourself, because too many people have not made it over the long run, and you need to make it over the long run. And so that's why we said yesterday or the day before, sometimes we tolerate too much and then it has a negative effect. We should be more tolerant than a tree, but not everybody's ready to be more tolerant than a tree, and then some people trying to be more tolerant than a tree burn out or destroy themselves. So it's a reality, and you have to apply it according to the situation. I'm not saying every situation this is true. We should be tolerant like a tree. We should surrender. But you have to understand how much you can tolerate and surrender. The other thing is sometimes we tolerate something we shouldn't tolerate. And so that becomes a problem. Yeah, we shouldn't tolerate being abused, or we shouldn't tolerate anything that would be harmful for our spiritual life. That wouldn't make sense. Yes?
When I was temple president and then associating with different colleagues at that time and even now, I see that it is all. You can almost not help but kind of those who are not going in line with your vision how the project should develop, or why they're not coming to them, why they're not helping, why they're not giving donation, you know. It's becoming like, I mean, unless you really advance, it's very rare when people don't think like that. I mean, it's rare that people don't think like that. That means you just bend people and then you judge people on the level of their surrender to your vision, how to run the project.
You're saying it's rare for people to bend with you, or it's rare for leaders to not get upset with people who don't bend?
It's very rare for leaders.
Oh, okay.
I mean, extremely rare. And another problem is that...
But I would say it's also common for people not to bend too far, especially with a vision they're not inspired by.
So then it's becoming like you have a favorite members of congregation and all that. It's kind of...
Well, can I say something? There's a devotee, and he has a company, or he manages a company, and they have a certain form of management, which is more democratic, where everybody participates. And so he introduced that in the country, and one temple said, no, we don't want it, and one temple said we did. And the temple that said we did is doing so much better than the temple that said we didn't. Consensus management, everybody's
on board.
Yeah, everybody gets on board with the vision, creates the vision.
Democracy, but I think Brahminical society is only governed by democracy because Brahmanas are independent.
Yeah, well, Prabhupada said that. He said that he said, it's Kali Yuga, none of you are smart enough to always be right, so we need to make decisions in groups. Did you know he said that? Yeah, that's pro-democracy. We all think it's ISKCON's autocratic. You have the guru, you have the temple president, GBC, but even though it is autocratic, I have the power because I have a position of leadership, but I don't misuse it autocratically. I could use it autocratically, and sometimes I do because it'll help, but in general I don't. Because that's not the best thing for the devotees. Right?
I just wanted to continue, and then, if devotees feeling under pressure, especially temple devotees, congregations, they kind of more or less chill. But even there's a lot of problem. But then, the preachers come, sadhus come, and they come to them for advice, and if they give them advice which is beneficial for them, what goes against the grain of temple authorities, suddenly this preacher is not anymore invited. So all preachers kind of trying to be politically correct. And it's I always think we need to have a anonymous helpline, in ISKCON.
What, for the preachers or the devotees?
No, for devotees. They just can call them and get unbiased advice.
I just heard a class that totally contradicts everything I learned in the last 25 years. But I can tell you how I think. I think that it's so hard to get out of Maya. Number one, it's hard to get out of Maya. And number two, it's hard to stay out of Maya. And number three, it's hard to stay out for your whole life. So, considering that, Prabhupada, his concern was that you just stay engaged in Krishna consciousness, and he wasn't so concerned how surrendered you were. He was concerned that you'd be engaged and be inspired. That was his concern. He wasn't, someone to exploit us. So I think that's important to understand. For ourselves and for others. So somebody comes to ISKCON, they're a conditioned soul, a conditioned soul is struggling with their mind and senses. That's the qualification of the conditioned soul. Right? So, when they become devotees, it means it's going to be difficult. Somebody joins, and they're all fired up, and they're brahmacharis, and they're out on book distribution, and they think, this is like the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me, and they think the rest of their life is going to be like this, right? Yeah, when we were brahmacharis, book distributors, it was all like, this is all we're doing for the rest of our life. We would travel, meet people, preach, do programs. It was like heaven. It was like, what more could you ask for? So exciting. You're meeting hundreds of people every day. Traveling with your buddies, eating granola and yogurt. It's the life. You couldn't imagine doing anything else. But then after about 7 years, you know, they join when they're 20, now they're 27. The mind is different, and then things change. And they see, oh, it's not so easy. So we need to be compassionate on ourselves and compassionate on others so they can make it through those difficulties. And their surrender has to be relative to what is best for them. So I could push you to surrender based on an absolute standard. I could push you right out of Krishna consciousness. And we've seen that, right? And you could push yourself out of Krishna consciousness because you push yourself to surrender on a certain standard, and then you realize you can't do it, and you think, what's the use? And I'll just give up. And we've seen that also. It's a certain nature for some people. All or nothing. If I can't perfect it, I give it up. The psychologist was saying, some people are like, they think, well, I should only have one cookie. And then they eat 2, and they say, well, since I've eaten 2, I might as well eat 10. It's like, you just totally give up. Well, you know, I haven't chanted 16 rounds for a while, so I might as well just, I'm chanting 8, but it's not 16, so I'll just stop. And I'm not very strong, you know, so I might as well just watch movies. So, you know, sometimes I have talked about the concept of self-compassion, and then some devotees are like, whoa, that's not Krishna conscious idea. You know, where's that? But it is. Because just as we want to be compassionate on others, and we want to facilitate them in the best way possible for their spiritual advancement, for their level of surrender, we have to do that to ourselves. And if we force ourselves to come to a standard we can't come to yet, not ready for, we could create negative reactions in our own consciousness. So you all come to Krishna consciousness, you're all on different levels, you have different desires. And it's so funny, you know. Rita Maharaj has been speaking about Krishna West and making people feel comfortable in Western clothes and like that. And there's so many places I go to preach, and practically no devotees are wearing dhotis and saris. And I never said, you know, dress this way or that way. It's just people are comfortable in certain areas and in certain ways of dressing, and some people are totally uncomfortable unless they're in a sari or a dhoti. And some are totally uncomfortable in a sari and a dhoti. So it's just a reality. You know, so when he was talking about Krishna West, I go, I already created Krishna West, and I didn't even do anything. You know, it's there in so many places. So that's natural. And so to allow yourself and allow other people to advance according to what they're able to do that they can maintain and is inspiring, then they'll keep advancing. But if we get too authoritarian, it may not work. And when people don't feel cared for, they may not stay in Krishna consciousness. And if you don't feel cared for, you may not stay in Krishna consciousness. And if you don't care for yourself, that's part of the problem. Not just other people caring for you, but you caring enough to get your lotus feet out of bed in the morning and over to the temple and chanting 16 rounds, you know, before a certain time of the day. You care enough about yourself to do that. You know, sometimes devotees would say, I have things that tempt me. And what do you do when you're tempted to do something that would be bad for you? And I said, this is my mantra. I love myself too much to ever do that to myself. Because I know whatever that is for you or me, whatever that is, it's that thing that would destroy me to some degree. And I love myself too much to destroy myself. And it's a powerful mantra. If you actually care for yourself and you realize, even though this is temptation, I want to do it, I wouldn't do that to myself. So in the same way, if I'm dealing with you and I want to move you in Krishna consciousness. I won't push you so hard that it would hurt you or harm you, because I wouldn't treat you that way. Because I don't treat myself that way, I don't treat you that way, and because I may treat myself harshly, I will tend to treat you harshly. Is that okay? You want to say? No. Does that make sense? So this is it's extremely important for us to remain steady in Krishna consciousness, but to understand that how we do it is not the way everyone else is going to do it. You know, when I became a devotee, it was like I read Bhagavad Gita. I said, "That's it. I'm convinced." and then devotees say, "Have you ever had any doubts?" No. You don't have any doubts? No. That's never been a problem for me. And I like getting up early, and I like doing austerity, and I like philosophy, and I hate to work and be part of the material world, and I don't relate. So Krishna consciousness for me is kind of like, you know, do you ever think about blooping? I go, oh, yeah, but I don't know what I would do if I blooped. I would just get my bead bag and chant. Like you know, I can't conceive of not being a devotee. That's me. Everybody's not like that. But if I judge you based on my standard, then if you come to me and say, you know, I'm really attracted to the material world, and I go, what is wrong with you? How can you think that way? You know, that's how I'll deal with you, because I'll deal with you according to my standard. Many of my godbrothers who were surrendered souls, when they first became gurus, they would see their disciples were not surrendered to them like they were surrendered to Prabhupada. And there was an adjustment period of having to accept that. You know, like they would say, you know, they would ask their disciples to do something, and they go, Gurudev, that's not really my nature. Doesn't make me feel good, you know. And I think, you know, the problem with the movement is, you know, we're too, fanatical. You know, actually 16 rounds is like, nobody's chanting 16 rounds anymore. What to speak of following the four regular principles, you know. And the Guru's like, I would never say that to Prabhupada in a million years. And over time, they would have to adjust to that reality that their disciples are different than they are. And their level of surrender is different than the surrender they had for Prabhupada. And they have to accept that and love them and help them according to where they're at. And not evaluate and judge people because of my standards. So that's very important. If we're going to keep people and inspire people. And if you're going to keep yourself, then don't judge yourself according to the standard of your neighbors. Because if your neighbors are more Krishna conscious, it's not going to help you to judge yourself, because maybe they're very advanced devotees from birth or by nature or their last life. And you may not be able to come to that level yet. Not that you shouldn't try, but you can get discouraged by comparing yourself to other devotees, isn't it? I mean, I do seminars, and a lot of times the Indian will bring their kids, like 10, 12 years old. And those kids are amazing. They sit through the whole seminar and taking notes and asking questions, and they could probably give the seminar after I leave. It's like amazing, you know? And I think when I was 10 or 12, I was not like that. And so if I compare myself to them, I think, God, I'm such a loser. You know, these kids are amazing. So we can't do that. And then we think, well, what do I have, and what can I give? And then I get inspired. Oh, I have this, I have that. I can do that. And so then I'm inspired. I'm not going to be like this little kid or my neighbor who chants 64 rounds and learns 25 shlokas a day and knows like 3,200 shlokas. And I can't even remember the 35 shlokas I learned for Bhakti Shastri 5 years ago. But I can do this and I can do that, and that will inspire me. So that's important. Because however you do it yourself, you'll tend to project that onto other people and expect them to do that. Why aren't you learning shlokas? You're not learning shlokas. What? You should be learning shlokas. You know, what's wrong with you?
It's actually a magic phrase, you know.
What's wrong with you?
No. You should be. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. We're given a lot of advices unsolicited.
Yeah. Well, you want to hear something really interesting? I can tell you something that may help you more than anything you've ever heard in your life. And it's really simple. And it's so funny, and it's so true. Perhaps the one thing that could help you in life in general, of course the holy name will help you more than anything, but we're just talking general. The one thing that can help you in general in your life, perhaps more than anything else, is to follow the advice you give to other people. Think about it. Think about all the good advice you've given. If you followed it, you'd be doing really good. Probably better than you're doing now. Right? Yeah. Hare Krishna.
It is called integrity, I guess.
Maybe. I kind of see it like being conscious, sensitive, real. Vidananda wrote an article and he was saying, this is the ideal. You know, he'd write something and say, this is the ideal. And then he'd describe what's going on in ISKCON and say, and this is the real. And he'd go down. And this is the ideal. And we all know this is the ideal because Prabhupada said it. It's in his books. He said it in his lectures. And this is the real. This is what's going on. So the ideal is always there, and that's what we strive for. But the real is also there. And the real is real for you in your present situation. It may not be good. It may not be the best. But you can't pretend that it's not real for you now. Right? And so you deal with it. And work from there. And find your strength and hold on to them. We have another problem. It's called Sankirtan. You say, oh, why is Sankirtan a problem? It's not a problem, but the way we do it is a problem. And this is the potential problem. And we've seen this. We go out on Sankirtan, if we go out for the right reason, we go out of compassion because we want to help people. Right? What I've seen is very interesting. We go out and we turn on the compassion lever in our brain. And now we go out and give the mercy to everyone. There's somebody, give them the mercy without discrimination. You have to be compassionate. It's cold weather and we're tolerating it. And people are saying nasty things to us and we tolerate it. And we get back in the van and go back to the temple and we turn off the compassion switch. And we start dealing with devotees, like, you know, sometimes insensitive. You've seen it? Like in an insensitive way. It's like we're dehumanizing ourselves. We're super compassionate, Superman compassion on the street, and then we're like super unsuperman when we come back. And somehow they're insensitive. And so that's interesting, isn't it? And that's what I would say, lack of integrity, because it's not balanced.
So you're very excited to bring you new people to the movement, but those who are in the movement, whatever, you know.
Yeah, you just like
they'll figure out.
or I would say one step worse is like I don't care. I'm just not sensitive to their needs and their struggles. You know, like for example, you know, a lot of the problems we had in the beginning of the movement were just due to the fact that we were young and we were not experienced. So someone would, you know, come to the temple president and say, you know, I feel like this, and it's difficult to do my service because when I do it, I feel like this devotee doesn't like me, and I have these doubts about my own ability. Now, what do you think he would say? Who cares how you feel? That's not bhakti, just surrender. You know, things like that. Like totally insensitive, thinking that I just need to get this person to surrender because that's what we're supposed to do, is surrender. So why should I care about how you feel? What does that have to do with anything? And your feelings are going against surrender, so why should I listen to your feelings? You should just surrender. So that kind of insensitivity, which is just lack of maturity or common sense.
It's actually an interesting story I've heard from Prabhupada memories. Somebody was telling about Jayananda Prabhu, and this devotee was telling that, he had some problems with the family, I don't remember what exactly, and he was kind of complaining to devotees, and everybody was like, come on, this is Maya, just don't think about it, just forget about it, like, chant Hare Krishna, be happy, and he said, I felt completely, no, misunderstood, nobody wanted to hear me, just they wanted to rush. And Jayananda Prabhu, and he was listening very attentively, and he said, yeah, it's really, I understand, it really hurts. So he just kind of understood, he reflected, and he said, and I was basically ready to bloom. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And this just shows the compassion of a real devotee. Though he was on a different level, but he could hear.
As we call the holy name Nam Prabhu, Krishna is his name. He's not different. So, Prabhupada has given an example. There's a big, big man. How do you satisfy him? He's a super famous, super wealthy. And then you meet him, his son is there, you have a little lozenge, a little candy, cost you 2 cents. You give it to his son's very happy, the man's happy. So, the devotee is dear to Krishna, more dear to Krishna than even his own self. And so, if I offend the devotee, because the name is Krishna, then Krishna and the name is offended. And now I'm chanting the holy name, but I'm offending the holy name because I'm offending the devotee who's dear to the holy name. And so I'm taking a bath and pouring mud on myself at the same time. Here's something interesting to meditate on. So I'm chanting my rounds. Every day I'm chanting, and I'm in the temple, I'm walking around the temple, and I go into the samadhi, and think, maybe it'll be better there. If it's not better then, I go home. Just go alone and chant. If it's not better there, and I gotta chant from the deities later. And I'm trying and trying and trying. I've been to 101 japa workshops and retreats, and I'm applying everything, and it's not happening. Why? It could be because of one of the offenses we're making. And it could be that in some ways we're offending the holy name because we're offending devotees. And so we're trying to chant and it's not happening. It's just like Krishna's not manifesting. And we like every tool, every technique. I read every book on japa. I've read it 16 times. I'm doing it all. And still, I'm not tasting it because I'm committing one of the offenses. If we were not committing the offenses, we would have become pure devotees a long time ago. We would have gone from Shraddha to Bhav in like 3 weeks. Because it's in Jaiva Dharma. They went Shraddha to Bhav in like one night, I think. Isn't it one night?
Very short time.
Yeah, they just, got the name and they chanted like all night and asked a few questions and, all of a sudden they're talking about bhava and prema. So when I first read that story in Jaiva Dharma, I was like, okay, that's the way it's supposed to be, You're supposed to get to bhava really quick. And, we're hovering on this anartha nivritti or vachana kriya and, that's because of offenses. And that is a big one. And we say, well, you'll fall down if you commit an offense. And so we don't really notice that we're falling down, but it's manifesting in this lack of attraction for the holy name, lack of taste. It's manifestation of the offense. But I got up in the morning, I went to Mangalartik and this and that, I just chanted kind of not so good rounds. So I don't really notice so much. I think, well, I haven't fallen down. But the lack of taste is a sign that offenses are being made. Not necessarily blaspheming devotees, it could be others. Distraction, inattention, pride. I think it's important for all of us to just reflect. A lot of times devotees say, well, lately my rounds haven't been good. And some devotees say, my rounds have never been good. Except occasionally here and there. I remember one god brother, he was a sannyasi. It's like New Year's resolution japa. He goes, my japa hasn't been good in like 3 years. I haven't chanted one good round in 3 years. That can happen. And so if that's happening and we're trying to get the taste and we're praying it's not coming, then we have to look at the offenses. And some may not be so obvious. Right? Yes.
You mentioned about Jayavadharma, how the person developed from Shraddha to Prema very quickly.
Yeah, to bother.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that as far as I remember, the person who achieved the Prema very quickly, he was already a Paramahamsa sannyasi. Impersonal, but still he was liberated.
No, this is another story.
Oh, okay.
They're starting.
Vijay Kumar and Rajanath.
Yeah, they were just given. They went to. I think they got to Baba. They were like very soon were experiencing ecstatic symptoms.
They've heard the glories of the holy names. They went home. They chanted, and then next day they were
chanted 64 rounds the first day, right? Or 190. Yeah. So the point is, not that it's going to necessarily happen to any of us, but it could if we weren't making offenses. So you obviously, you have a problem. You can't chant pure, then you are pure. But the chanting makes you pure. So it's kind of an interesting equation. How do you chant purely if you're not pure? But how do you become pure unless you chant pure? So your sincerity, your effort, your dedication, your effort to avoid offenses. That's so really the problem is in the offenses. And that's why this topic is so important, because this is one of the most common offenses we make. And because, the problem is like you offend a devotee and no lightning doesn't strike you dead when you do it. You just walk home and, eat your prasadam and it seems like nothing happened. But then the next day you go to chant your rounds and it's like, as one devotee said, my japa is like, what did she say? Sand and burnt toast, and is what it tastes like, something like that. She says, I see it should be like mango with a touch of mint and lemon. When I look at the other devotees, I think that's what they're tasting, but I'm tasting hot, dry sand and burnt toast. So that's the sign that something's wrong. And so we should notice that. Right? Like, sometimes you chant bad rounds and you just think, well, it's because I'm lazy. And it could be. Or it's because I don't care or this or that. But then, why aren't you caring? Why are you lazy? Does that have anything to do with making offenses? Could be. But when there's no offenses, then you get Shuddhana. Right?
Vishwanath Chakravarti says this in Madhurya Kadambini. Somebody may ask, I don't seem to commit offenses. I don't know if it, but if you don't taste the holy name and you hover on the lower stages, this is the indication. You
The
commit
sign,
offenses.
Yeah, okay.
You cannot say I don't commit offenses. Otherwise you will be on different levels.
It's so important. You finish your rounds. You finish your 16 rounds and you feel like, I just want to keep chanting. You ever felt like that? Like, 16 is so little. It's like nothing. It's like kindergarten. It's like for babies. You know? That's a good sign. But sometimes to get to 16 is like climbing the Himalayas. I can't do it. So something's going wrong there. It could also be a descent into the mode of passion. Our sadhana is getting messed up. Not necessarily one of the 10 offenses. It could be other things. But it's at least reflect on that. Am I making the offenses, or what am I doing that's not working? How am I treating the other devotees? Why don't you make an experiment tomorrow and serve as many devotees as you can and glorify as many devotees as you can, and then check out your japa after you do that. Prabhu, excuse me, can I glorify you for a minute? I'm trying to upgrade my japa today. Yesterday at Kirtan Academy they said if I glorify 5 devotees before japa, it could get better. So we had mentioned yesterday or the day before, if you want to chant bad japa, then just criticize somebody. Because it's pretty much guaranteed your japa will be bad. That being true, glorify somebody, serve the devotee, and see what happens. You have experience? Yes? You have experience? Yeah, try it. And even if you can't serve a devotee, but just think, I'm a servant of the devotees. Have that mentality. I'm not the master, I'm a servant. You know, I had this interesting experience a couple of years ago in Mayapur. It was so weird. I didn't even know why I was thinking about this. But I was in the temple, and all of a sudden, I looked around the temple and I said, I was initiated before anybody in this temple room. I'm like the oldest devotee, not in years. It just came to my mind, not that I was proud or anything, and I was thinking, but then I was thinking, wow, that could be an extreme trap. And I'm walking around the temple and people are banging into me. Don't you know who I am? They're sitting in front of me, and I was initiated in 1970, March. When were you initiated? So, anything that gives you some credibility can be a cause of pride. And then you stop thinking, I'm a servant. How can I be a servant of you? You're just a young devotee. You're supposed to serve me. But that mentality, not only do I serve you, I'm going to go up to 5 devotees and serve them and then change my mentality and think, now I'm not a servant. No, I have to maintain that. Even I can't maintain it. Now, I can't serve 5 devotees all the time, but I can maintain the mentality. And then, what does Mahaprabhu say? Kirtaniya Sadhari. If you have that mentality, and when you hit 16, you're going to keep going. And if you don't have that mentality, when you hit 16, you're going to chant another mantra to finish it off and say, thank God it's over. And if that's your mantra at 16, change your attitude to I'm servant. Yes? And when you lose that attitude, then you start offending devotees. Yes?
I have one question that's related to previous days, actually.
Okay.
You said that when you criticize a person for something he or she is doing or has qualities, it means that you have this quality or you...
It's possible, yeah. That's possible.
Is it also like, maybe you have this quality a little bit, but when you will start to criticize someone for this, you will develop this quality inside you and then it will just go up.
Well, here's the good thing about people criticizing you. According to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you get all their pious activities and they get all your sins.
Yeah.
So this one devotee was like criticizing me, like 108 criticisms per week. And I was like, could you stop? And then I thought, well, don't stop. Because I need some piety and I need to get rid of my sins. And you criticize them, they get your piety. You get their sins. But it's true. I think we all have that experience. You criticize somebody, and the next day you make the same mistake. And Krishna's like, ha ha ha. My wife, when we were younger devotees, my wife would lose her keys. It seemed like every year or two she'd lose like all her keys. So I was very sarcastic in those days. So when she would lose her keys, I'd say, "Oh, it's the annual key losing festival today." It's like so bad. Like, you want to know how to be a bad husband? Do that. Like, that's really bad. Guess what happened the next day? Who lost their keys the next day? And Krishna was saying, you're going to find fault. Be careful. But often we find fault so we don't have to take responsibility for that fault. We just like put all the blame on somebody else. Because, emotionally a lot of us are very young. We're not adults. And that's one thing that kids do, is they put the blame on someone else. Why'd you do that? Well, he hit me first. It's always like, well, why did you do that? Well, he always does it also. It's always put the blame on someone else. So that's what was another reason we criticize. So we don't have to confront our own shortcomings. We can just put it on somebody else. Deflect it off, and I don't have to deal with it. Because it's so hard to deal with, and it's so hard to admit, it's just easier to say, you do it. And I don't have to deal with it. It's over. I'm free. Yes?
Yes, regarding this of serving the devotees and raising the devotees, we heard this a lot of times, and sometimes actually this experience of just serving the devotees and just saying something that you like with the devotees, and it's very nice in this moment. You really feel, wow, this is so nice. And then when you go home, you start to feel proud because you serve the devotees, you praise the devotees. So the next day the Shabbos is still bad.
Yeah. Okay, so this is good. This is good. Because we have a problem. If we're looking for honor, then it's like everything we're going to do, we're going to congratulate ourselves. Right? But if you're not looking for honor, then nothing that you do or that comes to you will make you proud. And if you're looking for honor, practically anything will make you proud. Right? So, and that's how you like, if you find yourself in a situation becoming proud, then you should think, yes, I'm so proud that I'm just like craving any situation where I can congratulate myself for being good or better. And then and realize that's a problem. And if I'm developing humility, that'll never happen. It doesn't, the opposite. People will honor me and it won't affect me. And that's what we want to come to. So just use that as information that I have work to do in that department. And the goal of Krishna consciousness is not to draw attention to myself, it's to draw attention to Krishna and Guru. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Not 90% glories to Prabhupada and 10% to me. That's what all glories to Srila Prabhupada means. Guru Gauranga, all glories to Guru Gauranga. Guru Gauranga ki jai. So-and-so ki jai, ki jai, ki jai. That's all glories to them. How many for me? 0. All the attention goes to them. That's the idea. Now for a conditioned soul, that's not easy, because we didn't come to the world to give all glories to other people. We came to the world to get all glories for ourselves. Right? So our mantra is Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Terasata Sri Srimad Me Ki Jai. That's our problem. It's all about me ki jai. Isn't it? And so to rectify that, we have to, even if we don't want to, give glory to others, like force ourselves. And instead of becoming proud, just become happy that you could do it. There's a difference. Say, that was good, I did it, I feel good. Or I'm proud of myself, but not in an egoistic way. I'm proud that I had the strength to do that. And that's okay. That's healthy pride. But not, look at me, that's death. Because we're trying to give that to others. And it's so interesting, this problem we have of getting 16 rounds done, and then you get a rounds done, like, ah. Or, in the morning, it's like, ugh, ugh. Why is that happening? Well, part of the reason is because of pride. Junadapi Sunichena. How does that verse end? Kirtaniya Sadhari. If you do the 3 lines, tolerant like a tree, more humble than a blade of grass, give honor to others, not want for yourself. Then, when you get to 16 rounds, it's Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. I don't want to stop. But if I'm proud, that's when I want to put it down. Finish. Isn't that interesting? Did you ever put that together in your mind? Why is the last line Kirtaniya that I can chant all the time? It's because I'm humble. And I'm tolerant. And when I'm humble and tolerant, then, and I can praise others, then I get a taste for the holy name. And if I'm proud. So, want to hear a funny story? So this one GBC sannyasi guru, he made a confession that I can't chant 16 rounds. Everybody was like, he has thousands of disciples, this is a big thing, I can't chant 16 rounds, Everybody's like, Maharaj, sit down, we have to talk to you. He goes, no. What I mean is, when I hit 16, I can't stop chanting. I chant 32 every day. I can't chant 16. I can't only chant 16. So that's a good sign. That's what we want to come to. Can't chant 16. It's too difficult. You have to chant more. Yes?
Yesterday I just got a post. I read a post from one of my clients, and I just could not remain peaceful. I just want to read it to you, and this is kind of connected with being humble.
Okay.
I don't know from where she got it. Many believe that they will get others' respect by giving respect. The truth is that people don't respect people. People respect strength, and people respect power. In giving respect, you come across as weak. Then you don't aim to get anyone's respect.
That's true in the mode of passion.
I saw it's Machiavelli kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's totally opposite of what you're talking about.
Because whatever mode you're in, that becomes your reality. And so, if everyone's in the mode of passion, that's true.
Well,
that's the way the mode of passion works.
But even people in corporate world, or successful people, they speak about humility and compassion a lot.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with it.
But I have a little experience with working in the corporate world, and it's true what you say. Those are usually older people, or people are more sattvic, who've understood that, have wisdom. But I've spoken to a lot of people about humility, and they say, if I'm humble, I'll get completely run over. But I think they misunderstand humility, but it also means that they have a very rajasic culture in the company, and they don't reward humility and support, and they reward competition and
encourage.
Yeah, and step on people's toes, get ahead. Then you'll get moved up the ladder. The most valuable person is the one who moves everyone else up the ladder, puts them above and moves them up. But we want to put them down and get up. Anyway, yeah. But the point is, we all come from somewhat of this mold. When you become a devotee and you're trying to understand humility, it's a challenge.
But this actually doesn't work. People think it works.
Temporarily, maybe.
Huh?
Maybe temporarily, yeah. No, it seems like it was like people respect you, but do they really respect you? Or even if they do, they don't love you. They respect you because you have what they want.
Yeah, maybe a afraid, for fear.
But what if that people get more than you have? Then they don't respect you. Right. So, yes.
I was thinking about the Trinidad Pizza. How can we be more tolerant? Because we don't tolerate much things because we're not humble. And
Yeah.
we're not humble because we want some prestige and like some honor. So how can we achieve this? Because one depends on the other. It's not like
If Krishna says, if you don't tolerate, then you'll be thrown into the dualities of life. Things are good, you go up. Things are bad, you go down. And Krishna says you're not going to attain liberation unless you transcend duality. So, most people are happy when things are good, and they're not happy when things aren't good. They're completely influenced by their environment, how people treat them, and so forth. I could make you all very happy and say, today I have brought with me 1 million rupees, and you each get 50,000. You'd all be really happy, right? Or I could bring you some very bad news and make you very unhappy. So that's what Krishna is saying. Don't get affected. So tolerance is part of getting beyond duality. So now you can be steady in your service. If I'm not tolerant, then happy today, sad tomorrow, up, down, like a yo-yo. From my personal experience, in addition to this, I don't see being intolerant as an option, because there's so much to tolerate, and if you're not tolerant, you get completely thrown off. Your mind gets occupied and distracted by the problem. So if we're not somewhat tolerant, then we can't really function properly. You say tolerance is difficult, but it's actually the easiest way to function in this world. So I have a mantra to help you become more tolerant. You want the mantra?
Yes.
It's really easy. So think of something that bothers you, just like whatever it is, the way people drive, or the people who bang into you at the temple, or the way your spouse sometimes may get on your case, or a teacher you had that drove you crazy, or whatever. The government that you don't like. Just think of something you have a really hard time tolerating. Or a person. Okay? You got that person or situation?
Yes.
Yeah. Here's your mantra. Whenever you're in a situation like that, just say this mantra. That's interesting. Just say, that's interesting. And I'll explain why it works. Because by saying that's interesting, you take judgment off of what's happening. Like you're at the airport, you're waiting in line to, so-called line in India, you're waiting in line, to go through security, right? So what happens? You've been waiting, and it's like 3 or 4 minutes, and then some guy in a nice suit, he looks kind of wealthy, he just walks up to the front and throws everything down. That ever happened to you? Happens. It has. I don't think I've ever been to the airport when that hasn't happened. But now I just stand there like this. That's what I do. I'm like more aggressive than they are. But whenever that happens, I just say, "That's interesting." Because for us as Westerners, it's kind of like breaks a code of etiquette to you're standing in a line for 3 minutes and someone goes to the front. That's like, no, you don't do that. It's disturbing, right? It's like juvenile. It's like what a kid would do. So then you say, that's interesting. Or, the rickshaw wallet tells you it's 50 rupees. When you get off, it's 75. You go, whoa, that's interesting. Hey, that's interesting. So you're diffusing, you're not judging, and you're joking. And although it sounds like, well, Does it really work? All I can say is try it. But I've used it and it can work quite well. You know, because also, let's say something bothers you. Well, like, how much energy do you want to put into being bothered? You ever put a lot of energy into being bothered by something? And what's the result of putting energy into being bothered? What's the result? You just get agitated and you use up energy. So this is kind of like, okay, let's diffuse it so we don't have to be bothered by it. And, you know, like, you're going to buy something, they tell you how much it is, you come back and it's like 100 rupees more. And it's like, yeah, so you want to like ruin your whole day over 100 rupees? You told me 1,000 rupees, now you're telling me about 100. No, but Prabhu, I didn't realize because it took more cloth and we had to put it. No, you're lying to me, you know. You know, so it's like, you want to, like, is that worth it? You want to put that energy into it? I don't think it's worth it. You realize you have a rule. Did you know that? We have rules. We have agreements with ourselves about the way things should be. And when people violate those rules, we get upset. So when you're getting upset, ask yourself, what rule has been violated? And think about changing that rule. Because if you have a different rule, it won't upset you anymore. Right? Yes?
What if I'm in a position right now? I'm going to bring my reality. I'm teaching kids, teenagers. Yes. I have to give them rules. And I get upset when they broke these rules. So
no, you have to give them rules, but your rule is that you get upset when they break the rules. You can change that rule. Okay. That's your rule, and that's why you're getting upset. You're like, okay, I got a new rule. They're kids. They're going to have to hear this rule 100 times before it gets in. How old are they?
The youngest, I think, they're 11.
Yeah. So it's you know, or maybe I don't know how to enforce rules, or maybe they're too young. I remember when my daughter was young, I think she was, something was happening with her friends or something. I said, well, you have to be patient, you have to be kind to your friends, and like this. Well, like, stupidest thing I could say, she couldn't. She wasn't old enough to, like, understand it, you know. And I'd tell her all these things, she'd go, okay, and then she'd go do the same thing. So, you know, and I get upset. But that was my rule. I should have just changed the rules. You're too young to understand. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I don't know how to enforce rules.
In general, I don't like rules. I'm in a job that I have to give them rules.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe I get too lenient.
Yeah.
And then the problem gets bigger. So
yeah, maybe. Can we stop, or should we stop, or what should we do? One last question.
If we know that we have proud, we are lazy, but when practical situation comes, okay, it happened with me in the morning. I started kirtan and I was feeling like, okay, everybody will recognize me, okay, and I will do good, or I will do like this. And then I was struggling in my mind. Struggle was going on. Why I'm thinking like this? Mm-hmm. I'm not doing this for praise.
Yes.
And Jagannath ji is there, and I got service. I should do service, but it was a big struggle in my mind. So means the question is, we know our faults, but what is is there any simplest way to come out of disturbed?
Well, we're conditioned, which is why we sometimes think like that. But once you become aware of it, at that point, now you change it. Now you think, okay, like you said, Jagannath, this is for you. It's to glorify you. And somehow or other, I got sidetracked. So it's just like, okay, mind, stop it, don't think like this. You just have to recalibrate all the time as a conditioned soul. And when you become more advanced, you won't have to. But until we're more advanced, We have to recalibrate because we get off. Even though I know I shouldn't go off, I get off. And so recalibrate. Awareness. The worst thing is not to be aware of when it's happening. Because then you can't correct. At least if you're aware, you can correct. And that's part of the process. Okay, you're thinking a thought, and it's not the right thought, and you catch yourself. And so what do? You stop. Recalibrate. Right? Yes? Is that okay? That's all we can do. Until we become, there's so many things, like what should I do? Chant better rounds, read more about, it's all the same things. But if you're aware, you can start correcting. And like we said yesterday, allow yourself to feel. How do I feel right now? I'm doing kirtan to glorify Krishna, and I'm thinking how I hope everyone thinks I'm Superman, Superwoman, Kirtaniya. How does that make you feel? Like a fake, like I've come to ISKCON to glorify myself. Not like, what could be more of a paradox? I'm chanting Hare Krishna, and in my mind I'm thinking, everybody, aren't I wonderful? just see how wonderful I am. So if you allow yourself to feel, then it purifies you. Because emotions carry messages. Try it, see what happens. And then just think of the devotees, the very humble devotees that do kirtan, and what they're thinking, and then try to enter into their mood. How they're focused on the deity, and they're not focused on what other people think. Okay? We had a question, but I think Parananda was saying, talking about tolerance. He was glorifying the Sankirtan devotees, how tolerant they are. Okay? So we'll have kirtan, and then I think till 7, is that it? I have to make a phone call around 6 for like 5 or 10 minutes, or somewhere's around there, and then someone else can lead kirtan, at least for a while. Is that okay? Or does someone want to do kirtan? How do we do it? Other people lead kirtan?
I think you start. You need to.
You need to make a phone call at 6.
You need
6:15.
We'll keep on going.
Yeah, I'll go outside and call.
And then you come back and make more.
Yeah.